The dynamic of strategic emotional distance in a marriage is not, despite its initial appearance, a manipulative game or a punitive measure, but a crucial and often brutal mechanism for resetting a profoundly unhealthy relationship equilibrium. This distance triggers a predictable, deep-seated biological and psychological sequence in a wife, forcing her to confront the reality of her partner's value and, critically, compelling her to recalibrate her entire perception of his worth. The process is fraught with conflict and anxiety, demanding that the man maintain an unshakable, independent masculine frame against powerful emotional tides. But it is absolutely essential for breaking the toxic, insidious cycle where constant availability breeds contempt. If you are a man listening to this, caught in the quicksand of a stagnant marriage, where your efforts are met with criticism and your presence is taken for granted, you must understand that the problem is not your actions, but your accessibility. The fundamental reason strategic distance works is the corrosive, invisible effect of constant availability on human desire and respect. When a man is perpetually present, ceaselessly agreeable, and habitually jumping to fulfill every stated and unstated need, his partner's brain, driven by primal, unconscious survival programming, categorizes him as a secured, inexhaustible resource. He ceases to be a prized partner and becomes instead like the air we breathe or the water from the tap. Essential for life, yes, but no longer precious or exciting. This dynamic inevitably breeds contempt because there is no mystery, no challenging uncertainty, and, most importantly, no active reason for a woman to choose him daily. Modern men, conditioned by societal scripts that equate constant availability with being a good husband, often commit the ultimate self-sabotage by eliminating all sense of independent life and self outside the marriage, which, in a cruel twist of irony, destroys the very attraction and respect that formed the basis of the relationship in the first place. This strategy of distance, therefore, is not about punishing the wife. It is about the man reclaiming his lost masculine frame and independent self-identity. When a man correctly implements distance, he is literally finding himself, rebuilding his focus on his career, his physical fitness, his male friendships, his personal interests, and his spiritual life. The fact that this often makes his wife miss him is a byproduct of his self-reclamation, not the primary purpose. He is changing the entire nature of the relationship from one where he needs her validation to one where he chooses her from a position of independent strength and wholeness. When a man begins to pull back subtly, consistently, and without drama, the wife is forced through a predictable 5-phase psychological process as her unconscious mind recalibrates his value from secured resource to potentially scarce resource. This sequence takes weeks minimum, often stretching into months, and demands unwavering resolve. The immediate and most difficult response is the first phase, anger and initial testing. This is where 99% of men falter and retreat. She notices the shift. He's less eager to text back, takes longer to respond, or simply has immovable plans that don't include her. Her first, most visceral thought isn't a fearful, "I'm losing him," but a furious, entitled, "How dare he treat me like this?" This anger is not a personal attack, but a necessary biochemical reaction to the sudden perceived instability of a resource she assumed was secured. If the marriage already has a high baseline of contempt, this anger quickly escalates to nuclear-level tests, threats of divorce, packing bags, emotional breakdowns, or cryptic public posts on social media designed to shame him. The crucial test for the man is to maintain frame. If he caves during this phase, apologizing, immediately restoring his previous subservient availability, he has only cemented the idea that her emotional pressure controls him, that a little conflict makes him fold, and that he is exactly as weak as her deepest insecurity suspected. When this happens, something essential dies in her perception of him that can never be fully resurrected. The correct response is not coldness, but calm, pleasant neutrality, coupled with unyielding adherence to the new, independent activities and boundaries. This steady, non-reactive maintenance forces her anger to dissipate without achieving its desired manipulative outcome. After the initial anger proves futile, she enters the second phase, transition and self-questioning. The outward hostility fades, replaced by an internal state of cognitive dissonance. She is not yet ready to pursue, but she is no longer actively attacking. This is when she begins the crucial, necessary process of self-reflection. Why is he different? Why doesn't he care if I'm angry? Maybe I pushed him too far. Maybe I've been taking him for granted. Does he have options I didn't know about? This self-reflection, this essential process of internal accountability, is impossible while the husband is constantly available, because his availability allows her to always cast him as the villain. The distance creates a palpable emotional vacuum where she used to find his unconditional presence. She starts to feel the true weight of his absence, remembering good times and missing his stability, but her ego remains proud and stubborn. The man's job in this phase is to simply continue maintaining distance and focus on personal growth, allowing her to process without interference or validation. He must be present when he is present, but never constantly accessible. The third phase is rapprochement and testing with breadcrumbs. As the internal conflict of the transition phase resolves into a desire for connection, she begins to make small, calculated gestures toward re-establishing the dynamic. These are subtle, almost deniable tests, not genuine attempts at full reconciliation. She might send a funny personal meme, ask a practical question about an irrelevant detail, or create a minor, convenient excuse to contact him. The fatal mistake at this stage is for the man, starved for her attention after weeks of distance, to devour these breadcrumbs, immediately snapping back to full, desperate availability. This single failure instantly destroys all the value and respect built through the pain of absence. The correct response is warm uncertainty. Appreciate the gesture, respond pleasantly and briefly, but do not immediately return to her orbit. Maintain the independent schedule, the slightly delayed responses, and the new boundaries. This reinforces that while the relationship is important, his life and his self are more so. Following the breadcrumbs, the relationship moves to the most challenging phase: provocation and boundary assault. This is where she tests the man's new frame with intentional, calculated provocations. These can take two forms: positive provocations, being unexpectedly sweet, initiating intense sex, dressing provocatively, or negative provocations, picking petty fights, mentioning how a male coworker admires her, or suggesting they take a break. She is measuring his reactions to see if the distance resulted in a real permanent change in his character, or was just a temporary tantrum that she can now break. Maintaining frame here is paramount. The man must remain pleasantly neutral and non-reactive. If she initiates sex, he enjoys the intimacy but does not abandon his independent activities the next day. If she tries to trigger jealousy with talk of other men, he remains calm, unthreatened, and focused, refusing to take the bait. By consistently demonstrating that her old buttons no longer work, he forces her to realize that if she wants connection, she must relate to the new, self-possessed version of him, abandoning manipulative tactics for genuine engagement. If the man maintains his frame and consistency through all four testing phases, the relationship enters the final, most rewarding stage: genuine pursuit and dynamic restructuring. She will begin to treat him like she did when they were initially dating and actively pursuing him. She will initiate plans, express sincere admiration for his new focus and discipline, and actively structure her life around his presence, rather than assuming his constant availability. This signals that the toxic dynamic is finally structurally broken. The wife is now actively choosing her husband daily, not just passively settling for the man who is obligated to be there. Reconciliation in this phase is a partnership between two independent individuals, requiring the wife to match the husband's new level of independence and self-respect, rather than dragging him back to the old, comfortable dysfunction. The final reality a man must confront is the possibility of loss. Some men ask, what if she never misses me? What if the distance just leads to permanent separation? And the answer is the profound, saving truth. Then the relationship was already dead. Distance did not kill it. It merely exposed the truth, like peeling back a bandage from a septic wound. You cannot make someone miss you who fundamentally does not value you, and you cannot create genuine, lasting attraction where the well is dry. In this scenario, the man has still won, because he has rebuilt his self-worth, his independence, and his masculine frame, positioning him to attract a partner who will value the complete, self-contained man he has become. The alternative, continuing to be the constantly available, emotionally dependent, and perpetually undervalued satellite, is not a relationship. It is a slow, agonizing death of his spirit. The man's only choice, his only path to self-respect and sanity, is to risk the relationship for the sake of his self and trust the phases of distance to either save the marriage or save himself. The man's choice ultimately is between temporary but curative discomfort for long-term relational health or continuing to choose familiar dysfunction for a slow, agonizing demise. The choice to initiate distance is the choice to become someone worth missing.